দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ আরটিভি নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান Forthright আপনাদের সঙ্গে আছে আমি সৈয়দ আশিক রহমান। এই অনুষ্ঠানে আমরা কথা বলি বিভিন্ন সেক্টরের বিশেষজ্ঞদের সাথে যারা বাংলাদেশে কাজের অভিজ্ঞতা, উদ্দেশ্য এবং ভবিষ্যৎ পরিকল্পনা নিয়ে আলোচনা করেন। আমাদের আজকের অতিথি বাংলাদেশে ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনার হার এক্সিলেন্সি অ্যালিসন ব্লেক অ্যান্ড জাতিসংঘের আবাসিক সমন্বয়ক হার এক্সিলেন্সি মিয়া সেপ্পো। Very welcome,
Good.
Excellency.
Thank you.
Alison Blake and Mia Seppo at RTV Studio.
Thank you.
How do you find it here?
It's very nice to be here. Thank you for making us so welcome, and
Great.
good
Great.
to say hello to all your viewers as well.
And your first visit here
So
in
my first
RTV.
visit to RTV
great.
studios.
Thank you very much, and Mia Seppo being here. Since we are talking on 16 days activism, before starting our main discussion, let's play a video on this year theme.
Violence against women and girls is a human rights violation.
It happens everywhere.
At home,
at school, at work,
On the streets, on the internet.
During natural disasters and in wars and conflicts.
It can happen to every woman at any point of time.
it can happen regardless of economic status, education, class,
race or sexual orientation.
To every woman.
In Bangladesh, 1 in 5 teenage girls are sexually abused by their partners.
72.6% of married women experience some form of violence by their own husband at least once in their lifetime.
Just one incidence of violence against women and girls is one too many.
While the names and context may differ,
Every day, everywhere, women and girls are facing violence.
We need to bring their stories to light.
Let's support the brave survivors that speak out.
Hear Me Too is the theme of the UN 16 Days of Activism, because survivors of violence and activists need to be heard.
For far too long, we've been passive bystanders.
We remain silent, not taking responsibilities.
Letting gender norms and fear of shame
Allow violence against women and girls to escalate to pandemic proportions.
but the time has come to speak up, to stand up, and to be heard.
Women and girls, break this silence.
Let's support each other and speak out.
for the girls and women who are suffering,
Who can't speak for themselves, caught in the vicious cycle of violence.
Men and boys, stand up and call out your peers for inappropriate behaviors and attitudes that fuel violence.
It's a responsibility for all of us.
the United Nations in Bangladesh is with you.
As we work together for the same goal to prevent
And end violence against women and girls.
We need you to take your stand.
Stand together to end all violence against women and girls.
Let us raise a future generation that believes in equality, respect, and non-violence.
not just for these 16 days, but for every day. Let's make the promise of eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls by 2030 a reality.
Yes, not only 16 days. Her Excellency Alison Blake and Mia Seppo. As we hear, the theme for this year, 16 days of activism, is #HearMeToo. Traditionally, violence has been a private domain. How does this initiative can work in general?
Well, I think in general, partly because a lot of violence, but not all, has been in the private domain. Women have felt that there is nowhere to go. It's been hidden and it hasn't been talked about, and they've felt that there are no outlets for them. So some of the 16 days, and as the film says, it's not just about 16 days, is about giving women a voice.
Exactly.
So that women who are struggling privately can know that they're not alone, that there are things that they can do, that there are people who can help and support, but also so that men can hear the message that this is not acceptable, that the domestic violence rates are very high. Men and boys must join in the struggle with us so that we can have a society where everyone is treated by respect, including in the home. But I mean, I think Mia will say much of this is about bringing this into the open, giving a voice to the survivors, giving a voice to the people who want to make change.
Well, Mia Seppo.
I think Alison has said it all. There's not much to add to that. I think theme of this year's celebration of Hear Me Too is
Hashtag Hear Me Too.
Yes, is to recognize that the Me Too movement has really become a global movement, and it has sent a very clear signal around the world of how common violence against women is, and yet it is. There's a lot of women out there who are waiting for their Me Too moment, so to speak. Their voices are not yet heard. They are within structures of power, or they are from vulnerable groups, so their voices are not heard. And we have a responsibility to create a space to make sure that their voices are heard, and not just that their voices are heard, but that action is also taken.
And this activism is not only for 16 days, it's for every day. Well, Mia Seppo, critics are said that hashtag MeToo is an initiative to work against male. What is your opinion? What do you say? And what are the reasons for?
I think hashtag MeToo has triggered a very fundamental conversation globally in so many different countries. It's also led to a lot of searching conversations within the so-called feminist movement itself. I think it's really important to make sure that Me Too is understood not to be against men, and that the movement is acting in a manner so that men does not feel that it is against them. The gender agenda is not an agenda for women. The gender agenda, the gender equality agenda is for men and women. And I hope that as we move forward, we'll have more and more men globally and in Bangladesh who put themselves forward as he-for-she champions, who really want to speak on these issues, and more men who do what our Secretary General did, was to openly say...
Would you like to add something?
Well, again, it sounds like we're clearly demonstrating that this is an agenda that we both feel very passionately about, and where I think we do see things the same way. All I would add is that the hashtag Hear Me Too is around creating, as Mia has said, a space for everyone to work for a better society, and that this better society founded on gender equality is not just the right thing, but it's also the circumstances in which everyone can flourish, and that there is also an economic and a business case for gender equality. Companies that have gender equality do better. Decisions that involve women do better. And so actually this isn't about doing something that is at the expense of someone. It's for all of us.
Well, as you talk about the gender equality, we observe that there is a gender parity in education and employment, but also gender-based violence has increased. What are the reasons behind, you think? And how does British government take initiative to resolve this problem in England as well in Bangladesh?
Well, gosh, there's a lot in your question. I think one of the... I'm not sure about the statistics that domestic violence or gender violence has increased. I think we're more aware of it. I think women are speaking out. I think men are also speaking out. But what is clear from the statistics is that a tiny proportion of the people who suffer it actually feel that they can get redress. There is a huge amount of impunity, and so enabling the victims to have a voice, creating women-friendly spaces at police stations, empowering people, including families, to intervene is a very important point. So gender equality is at the heart of the SDGs, SDG 5, and there are many things that you can do, all of which, anything that does empower women, helps create the conditions in which we can start to tackle violence. There's a set of things you can do which is around law enforcement, access to justice, supporting the victims, ensuring that they get legal counsel, looking at redress and making sure that they can go to the courts, and if they do go to the courts, that perpetrators are punished. There's another set of issues that you can look at around educating women. I think Bangladesh has done a lot to get women into the labour force, but they're still underrepresented. Women are half of your population, and less than 39% of women are informal labour. There's a lot of unpaid labour that they do that is not recognised. But I think quality education for women and girls for 12 years. I think everyone would agree that there's still a way to go. There are really powerful, good role models across almost every aspect of Bangladesh society. But if you look at the statistics, actually most women in Bangladesh who are in the labour force, and this is not to say they're not doing very worthwhile jobs, tend to be at the sort of lower skilled end or in the RMG factories, and I've seen what an engine for change that is. The women are on the lines. They tend not to be in supervisory or managerial roles. So upskilling women and men, getting women into managerial and leadership roles more, eliminating child marriage is another factor. We could talk about that in more detail. And then there is tackling the social norms that support the conditions in which violence can take place against women and girls, or against men and boys as well.
Her Excellency Alison Blake and Mia Seppo, these questions for both of you. Do you think that violence affects everyone equally in Bangladesh perspective? If not, then why? Mia Seppo, first you.
Violence affects men and women differently because we still live in a world where we have a strong patriarchal culture. We have power imbalances in terms of access to resources and opportunities, and therefore lots of the violence comes from these power imbalances. I think the state minister actually put it very well in the launch of the 16 days of activism on Sunday, where she basically, her or the secretary, I can actually not remember now, but walked through the life of a woman and looking at how at every stage of a woman these power imbalances kick in. So as a child, it's a question of access to nutrition, food. As a young person, it's about who gets priority in terms of education. As a working woman, it's about harassment at the workplace. Throughout the cycle of a woman's life, it's about a much heavier care burden in terms of caring for the family, caring for children, caring for the elderly. And this influences a woman's life throughout. So because of these imbalances, violence affects women more. However, when you look at how violence affects a human being, there is no difference. I mean, violence creates deep trauma in men and women, in boys and girls, and influences the rest of the life of the person who gets exposed to violence once or twice or continuously. And it holds people back, it limits their potential, and it's something that we have to end in order to give everybody a chance to live their full lives.
We'll talk more about the violence against women after a short break. দর্শক দেখছেন আরটিভি নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ফোর্থরাইট। এই পর্যায়ে নিচ্ছি বিরতি, ফিরছি একটু পরেই। সে পর্যন্ত আমাদের সাথে থাকুন। দর্শক আবারও আমন্ত্রণ ফোর্থরাইট অনুষ্ঠানে। আজকে কথা বলছি বাংলাদেশে ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনার হার এক্সেলেন্সি অ্যালিসন ব্লেক এবং জাতিসংঘের আবাসিক সমন্বয়ক হার এক্সেলেন্সি মিয়া সেপ্পোর সাথে। Welcome again.
Thank you.
Her Excellency Alison Blake and Mia Seppo to RTV Studio. Well, Excellency Mia Seppo, in your view, what are the three things that we can do on a priority basis in the fight against violence against women?
I think it's important to remember that there's not like a super simple formula and we do 1, 2, 3 and the problem is solved. If it was that easy, I would trust that the world would already have done so. So it's a bit more complicated than that. But I think there's three things. The first thing, and Alison has referred to it, is legislation. So you need to have proper legislation in place. And then, you know, laws are the laws of the people. So, you know, it also reflects a readiness of a country to tackle some of these problems. The second is implementation. So after you have good laws in place, and Bangladesh has some very good laws in place when it comes to gender-based violence, then focus needs to be on implementation as well as building the capacities of the institutions that are expected to deliver on these laws training of law officials, law enforcement, and the whole chain in terms of justice, making sure that there's services available, and there's services available to everybody in a non-discriminatory way in terms of survivors. And then I think the last thing, you have the legislation, you have the implementation, and then you have the social norms. And that in any society is the most difficult piece. So changing the way we look at the role of a woman, the way we look at the role of a man, how we raise our children to step away from these stereotypes, how we change our own behaviors in terms of looking at the role models, and how we get to a culture that no longer considers it acceptable. So moving away from boys will be boys. I mean, boys will be boys. That doesn't mean that they are you know, harassing women. That's not being a man. So I think it's about that last piece of the social change, which in any societies is the most difficult, often the most threatening, because it gets too deeply entrenched.
Well, Alison Blake, specialists are says that patriarchy and power imbalance between women and men can eliminate gender-based violence in Bangladesh. How does government can ensure this partnership in all levels of society?
I think to go back to some points we made earlier and some of the points that the Honourable Minister has made, government has a really important role in setting the policy framework and working with parliamentarians and civil society to frame the right laws. The government is responsible for the law enforcement agencies. Other institutions of state, for example, the judiciary, are responsible for their role. And I think one of the things that the government of Bangladesh has done, and where the development partners work, is to give effect to the right laws, the right policies. And here in Bangladesh, there is a focus around, and I've mentioned it before, so I'll mention it again, SDG 5, about empowering women and working towards gender equality, and putting that not just as an add-on to your policies, but that when you think about anything you are thinking about doing, you think about, what will the impact be on gender equality? Will this empower women or not? Will this help? And I think there's a lot of interesting work going on here, some of which we support, working with the line ministries. They are not the ministry who has central responsibility for women and girls and children, but the finance ministry, the home ministry, the foreign ministry, because one of the things that we've learned in the UK and are trying to do is to put women and girls at the heart of everything we do. We do it here through our development programme. So I think the development partners have a really big role, but in the clip of the footage that you showed at the front, to stand alongside and to support. We're not here, we will express our views, we will say what we would like to see, we will speak out, and we will advocate, but the responsibility for giving it effect is by working in partnership. And so we will work with the government, we will work with all the institutions of the state, we will work with teachers, law enforcers, with the people who are trying to do this, and also deliver support where we can to ordinary women. For example, the British, through our DFID, we've worked with the victims of violence, we've worked to get them access to lawyers, we've worked to get them medical support, we have worked to give them access to justice.
Government is giving.
Well, and we help support that. I mean, there are many things that, for example, Bangladesh and your UN peacekeepers, the police and the armed forces, when they're sent overseas, have got phenomenal experience about working to tackle sexual violence, working to support victims, and being sensitive and aware. And I think a lot of that experience, which they've brought back here, is things that we would like to draw attention to and support.
Well, Seppo, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just very briefly, I agree with everything Alison said, but I think, you know, we stand in solidarity with the Bangladeshi women who speak up. we stand in support of the Bangladeshi institutions who tackle this agenda. We stand behind and support the government in its efforts. So I'm just emphasizing, we're not in front, we're not leading. So this picture here is a little bit misleading in that way, if I may suggest. You should really have some very strong advocates in civil society who've been working on these issues in Bangladesh for decades. You have some very visible women, from the Speaker of Parliament to others, who have been engaged in ending child marriage and these issues for decades. So, you know, this is not our agenda. This is only, we're here to support, but this is Bangladesh agenda, and it's collectively civil society, government, members of parliament, you know, the civil service who are moving this agenda forward.
All the policymakers can actually join. Alison Blake, would you want to add?
Well, very much that, which is there is extraordinary work being done across Bangladesh. There's a lot more to do, but we find this an exciting place to work because of the energy, because of the enthusiasm, because of the role of committed, powerful, brave people to deliver change and to improve women's lives. And I've had some extraordinary discussions, and Mia has mentioned some of the people we work with. So I think our job is very much to help support, amplify, stand with and draw attention to the issues.
Well, do you think that the swift justice and strong legal action against the perpetrators can reduce the violence against women?
I think impunity is a big issue that isn't just about these particular set of crimes, although that's what we're talking about today. Yes, I do. I think for someone to commit a crime or to do a violent act towards someone and know that they will be prosecuted, that the crime will not go unpunished, I think that would make people think. A lot of this is about changing the way people think, the behaviour, raising our boys so that they will not raise their hand, not just to women and girls, but to each other. But if someone does do this, then they need to know that unacceptable behaviour will trigger a penalty. And so I do think that swift justice, and it is justice, it's not taking the law into your own hands, it's having proper procedures, evidence, but proper procedures that will hold people to account, because each of us is responsible, whatever our upbringing, for our own actions.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, Seppo, the swift justice and strong legal action against the perpetrators can reduce the violence against women.
Absolutely. If you break a law in a country, there needs to be consequences. And there needs to be trust that the institutions that are there to pursue those who break the law and who will punish the perpetrators will function. So that goes for any criminal act. What needs to be recognized is that when it comes to sexual violence, we're up against an additional in order to get justice. And again, this is not just in Bangladesh, this is in so many other places, and to some extent this is why the Me Too movement has been so strong. There's another offshoot, there's many offshoots of this global movement, and one of them is hashtag Why I Didn't Report. And if you look at the stories coming out from that globally, it's stories around lack of trust that action will be taken, lack of trust that the institutions and the system will serve the survivors of violence. So I think we have to recognize that it requires more effort maybe than a normal criminal process to get to the core of sexual based violence. It requires much more training of police enforcement. It requires medical staff and services that can serve the women. It requires a judicial system that can prosecute the cases. And when you look at the percentage of reporting of rape, and when you look at the percentage of convictions of rape, these percentages tend in most countries to be way too long. The judicial process tends to be way too long. And that's the case in Bangladesh as well. So I think we have to recognize, you know, if you understand the judicial system in a country and you know where there's some areas that needs to be strengthened.
Excellency Alison Blake, in your opinion, in your views, what is the role of the media to eliminate the gender-based violence in society?
Well, I think the media has an important role in drawing attention to the crimes, I think in a way that is not sensationalized, that is respectful of the victims, that because I think one of the things that the UN did a survey, I think, published recently, looking at murders of women reported on a single day globally. You have an important role. You have to use it responsibly.
Well,
but I think that you can have an important voice in advocating for this to stop. It's not about selling newspapers, but it is about ensuring that people's voices are heard. That is also, and thank you for giving people like us time to talk and to drawing attention to the 16 days of activism. I think, as Mia has said, giving a platform and a space to your really powerful Bangladeshi advocates from civil society, from government and wherever they are. And we can work with you on that. I think there are probably a set of guidelines which exist on best practice, because some of the coverage can be unbalanced and sensational. I think your aim is not to whip up mob hatred, and we've seen stories not in Bangladesh but elsewhere of fake news and vigilante violence, and I think your message to also to show that when there has been a successful prosecution or a perpetrator held to account, that is covered as well, because that will give hope to women to come forward and to feel that they haven't spoken in vain. And there's probably more that we can do as a donor partner. We do work around working with the media, supporting journalists, freedom of expression, and also responsible reporting, and we can do more around that.
Mia Seppo, how does the development partners can work with media? And about the media role, if you
Sure.
say something.
Let me just add a few things to what Alison said. I think there's kind of two different pieces of it. So one is how does the media report on violence and crimes when they have happened? And indeed, I mean, this is critical for it not to include names and faces and pictures and kind of put the victim, in a sense, at risk, you know. So the reporting and how it's done is absolutely critical. But I think there's a role that comes before that.
Should be very carefully and with responsibility.
Very carefully and very responsibly, absolutely. But there's a role before that, and that's all about prevention. And that's about how does the media portray women? How do you portray women in business? How do you portray women in politics? Which is really important now as we get into elections, to make sure that the media can professionally and fairly give coverage to male and female candidates in their campaigns. And the general, you know, how do you portray women? Because that's how you start to influence the stereotypes. And by influencing those, that's how you contribute positively to preventing violence from happening. I think we have to recognize that we've lost already when the violence is happening. I mean, then it puts systems to test in terms of ensuring justice. But what we need to, the fight that really needs to be fought is on the prevention, making sure it doesn't happen in the first place.
Excellency Alison Blake and Mia Seppo, we are almost end of this program. Any final thought you want to share with our viewers? Alison Blake.
I think the final thought would just be that if there is a woman out there watching this tonight, you are not alone. There are people that you can go to. We will do more to make sure that you know where to go. But, you know, it is not just happening to you. And there are routes. It's not easy and you have to be brave, but there are people who can support you. And we are working to make sure that no one is alone and that it stops and that you are protected.
Thank you. Mia Seppo.
So I'm not going to, I join Alison in this call to all the brave women out there. But I think what is really important to keep in mind for me is that this can be done. You know, there's a lot of you know, we emphasize a lot, you know, you spoke about that the statistics show there hasn't been improvement in domestic violence or or we look at some of the statistics around women, harassment on campus or in public transport, and these are very alarming statistics. But I think what we should keep in mind every day as we wake up, not for 16 days, but for 365 days, is that this is a battle that can be won. And if we work together, we can actually try to bring an end to violence against women and girls. And that requires a very collective effort. And we, the video that you showed was the whole UN team in Bangladesh. All of us stand behind supporting the efforts to end violence against women and children in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
দর্শক, একটি সমাজের অর্থনৈতিক উন্নয়নে নারীদের ভূমিকা অনস্বীকার্য। সময়ের সাথে সাথে সমাজের প্রতিটি ক্ষেত্রে নারীদের অংশগ্রহণ যেমন বেড়েছে, তেমনি নারীর প্রতি সহিংসতা বৃদ্ধি পেয়েছে উল্লেখযোগ্য হারে। তবে সমাজের প্রতি ক্ষেত্রে নারীর প্রতি এই সহিংসতা প্রতিরোধে জাতিসংঘ সহ বিশ্বের বিভিন্ন দেশের যে পদক্ষেপ, তার সাথে আমরাও জানাই একাত্মতা। 16 ডেইজ অ্যাক্টিভিজমের এবছরের প্রতিপাদ্য #HearMeToo এর সাথে আমরাও শুনতে চাই সবার কথা। আজকের অতিথির সঙ্গে একাত্মতা জানিয়ে আমরাও বলতে চাই, আর নয় বৈষম্য, বন্ধ হোক নারীর প্রতি সহিংসতা। এই প্রত্যাশায় শেষ করছি ফোর্থরাইট। এতক্ষণ আমাদের সাথে থাকার জন্য ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।